The Nigerian Senate has approved President Muhammadu Buhari's request to raise a loan of 850 billion naira from the domestic capital market to finance projects in the 2020 budget. Similarly, the Central Bank of Nigeria, the CBN, said it has resumed sales of dollars to SMEs who need foreign exchange for essential imports, as well as Nigerian students in foreign schools who need to pay their school fees. Now, this comes as a worldwide COVID-19 lockdown begins to ease up, even as business activities are expected to gradually return to normal. Well, joining us on the show to discuss this development is a financial analyst, Dr. Boniface Chizea. Good to have you on the show this morning.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here.
Okay, so President Buhari has asked for this 850 billion naira loan to be sourced from the capital market as against, foreign loans. What's your thought about this, considering the fact that the Senate has actually gone ahead to approve that loan and right after that asked for details of the loan to be brought before the Senate so that they can actually look at it and find out exactly what the details of the loan application is all about? Give us your thoughts.
Well, I think that there are lots of misunderstanding about this loan. What is important is that this loan was included in the budget, and that wasn't made clear the way it was announced. The way it came across, it was as if there was a request for a fresh loan. But that wasn't the case. What happened was that when the budget was approved, the amount of money that we put in the budget, that we wanted to obtain, through seeking loans, it was split into two. And so it was 1.5 trillion naira, and then 850 was supposed to have been sourced overseas. And then 740 something was supposed to be sourced locally. And so what's happened is that, given what has happened, given the circumstances of COVID-19, and the fact that if you look at Nigeria and if you look at what has happened to us, you look at the fact that we're no more earning money from oil. So that's a major source of foreign exchange income. We're not earning this money. And so even going out there to source this money, might not take it for granted. So we might go out and we might not find people who want to give us this money. And to the extent that, yes? Yeah, so I'm saying to the extent that we don't want to have any delays, in trying to implement the budget. So I think that it was a wise decision, to, instead of going overseas, that this money should be sourced locally. And I think that also we were talking of stimulating the Nigerian economy, so that's good for the stock market. And most of us those who have played the market, those who are going to market to play money market, to purchase instruments from the market, they will tell you that interest rates collapse in the market. And for most middle-income persons in this country, they're going to stock markets and doing money market investments is the major source of investment for them. And that collapsed. So you put 5 million naira in the market for 3 months, and you're getting for something naira, as interest. Now, certainly that wasn't good. It's not a good incentive. So we expect that this coming back, this money being rechanneled, to be sourced, from our stock market, that's a good development.
Right. So if we focus again on the funds itself, so this 850 billion naira has been sourced locally, domestically, but it does seem as though there are plans in place to refinance those monies with international funds. Could you shed a bit more light on those plans there?
I can't understand. How would you want to refinance money? We don't want to refinance. I said if you have a debt, what you refinance is when you have a debt, then you can refinance your debt. And by way of trying to restructure your debt. But if you're talking of some money that has been put in the budget, you don't refinance it. You're trying to source this money. And so the issue we might have is that when we go to Nigerian capital market, are we going to be able to raise that amount of money? And I think we should be able to do so for as long as the coupon rate it's right, is attractive, to the average investor. And that's what is important.
Well, one of the reasons actually given for this loan is that it is needed to replace previously approved external loans since conditions from the international capital market really are not conducive for borrowing. But put that side by side with what respected economist Chike Obi said, that Nigeria actually needs about $20 billion to fix or to avert, financial crisis. Now, when you place the $2.36 billion or so, which is what the $850 billion naira actually amounts to, how much really can that achieve for us if we're to stimulate the economy and avert financial crisis?
I think we have to be very careful with figures being thrown around. That's that guy's Chike Obi's estimate in terms of what he thinks we might require. You have to also factor in the fact that we are sourcing $3.4 billion from IMF. And so that money is coming in. And even IMF, in approving this money, did observe and did say that Nigeria, there's still going to be some funding gaps. So we expect that we'll go and be able to source some monies from other multilateral bodies like African Development Bank and so on and so forth. So we'll be able to do that. And so we shouldn't get hung on the figure he has quoted. It's an estimate. What we know is that there's going to be funding gap. And I'm sure that if we progress and with the money that we've been given, if we manage it very well, we should be able to. Nigeria is a beautiful bride when it comes in terms of being able to source money, from overseas or, from within. Well, unfortunately, COVID-19 will seem to some extent be affecting us. That's our attractiveness from the perspective that the oil markets, for instance, now is no more in existence. And so that's the challenge we have. But I think that we should be able to source this money. And the challenge is going to be for us to make sure that this money, even when we source it, we are going to make sure we deploy it effectively to achieve the goals we have in the budget.
Right. I mean, on the topic of deploying it effectively, this process has been very quick. The president made this request within a letter to the Senate. The Senate accelerated its process in order to approve it. But how far do you think this money will go? What areas is it going to address? What is this money essentially going to be used for?
I think in terms of those who are watching us, it's good to put this in context. It was a loan that was in the budget that was approved before. It was earlier approved by the Senate. All they did was, Senate just approved that this money, instead of being sourced overseas, should now be sourced locally. And then also because when this was first announced, it wasn't so clear to most people, even some of us that are analysts, it wasn't so clear to us. Some of us thought that it was a fresh loan. And we thought that because of the relationship between the executive and the legislature, this ninth legislature, which we seem to be like hand in glove, that how come they resumed and immediately this loan was approved. So we should be very clear about that. So that's what it is. I'm sure that by the time we begin to implement, one of the problems we have, let's first of all recall that at the commencement of this COVID-19, the budget. We did a budget. We did another budget, and so the budget that was about 8-point-something trillion naira was dropped to about 5 trillion naira. The oil market was down from $57 a barrel to 30. So there was a reduction. So we already took that into account, and I expect that the thing that's going to happen is that we might not see too many capital projects being implemented. That's all that will happen. So you have a crisis on your hands, and what is important is that you should make sure that you have your current expenses, that we attend to them, and that's what is important for us.
And if I heard you correctly, we will not be doing much of capital projects, which means in themselves that whatever measures we're putting in place now are at best, temporary or stopgap measures, as some analysts have said, that there is a need for Nigeria to begin to put in place more sustainable measures. Like, for example, take Nigeria back to the 70s when agriculture was the mainstay of Nigeria's economy, and actually move away from this monoproduct economy that continues to be oil. And as a matter of fact, IMF has said that Nigeria will lose about $26 billion this year from oil and gas exports. I mean, since nobody is buying at this time, in spite of the fact that we don't even have storage facilities. That's another major problem that would need a strategic reserve. What are the more sustainable measures that Nigeria needs to put in place to avert future situations like we have on our hands now?
Well, I think that's what one would say, is that if you follow closely, monitored what has been happening in this environment, you know that for some time, the central bank has been talking about, you have the Anchor Borrowers program, for instance. Central bank has been talking about going on and singing and talking about the fact that we needed to make sure that we grow things we need in this economy. And so they went along and excluded 43 items and said they were no more eligible, to getting official foreign exchange. And now they started looking into it. So we now had this Anchor Borrowers program, which has made this country to a large extent, self-sufficient in rice. And so it's not correct to just say we've been doing it. And if you go check what is happening, if you look at historically what has happened in this economy, and the structural adjustment program that started in 1986, it was all meant, at trying to diversify the economic base of this country. And what's happened in this environment is that we face crisis, we put programs in place, we put plans in place, and as soon as the crises are over, we just go back to normal. And those things we put there are not being implemented. So I think that we know what to do. We started doing them. We need to diversify this economy. And one of the strongest areas in which we have to go is, make sure we intensify, make sure food security is in place. And then also, the central bank has also put some schemes, to reflect the economy. They put 50 billion naira there for people, small and medium-scale enterprises, for households, and people in the medical field, and so on and so forth. So we expect that as soon as this funding, this come on stream, and they're being implemented, now we begin to see activities within the economy.
You mentioned going back to normal. I wonder if you could give us an idea of what normal will be like once we're out of this pandemic. What will that actually look like for the economy? Well,
that's very interesting. What normal is going to look like, I think that we are now in the area of we have to guess. And normal is that we know certainly that what we've had before is not going to be the same again. The economy going forward is certainly going to change. Automatically, you can see that we have come to that this reality is beginning to come home. The president a few days ago just asked for the Rossy Report, on streamlining the ministries and so on. That was done in 2012, by Rossy, April 2012. That report was submitted. And that report was aimed at streamlining the agencies and so on and so forth, because we have bloated administration. And at that time, the agencies and ministries, departments and agencies were about 5,000. As we speak, they've gone to about 1,000. There was about 500, it's gone to about 1,000 today. And so when the president says, take this report and implement, then what does that mean? So it means that you have to go back to the drawing board and look at the things again, because what it was in 2012, it's a sea change from what it is today. But what's happening is that we begin to see that things are going to be streamlined. But I think that, like I keep on saying, we must not allow this crisis, go to waste. And we must, like we started now, we started with, trying to streamline the things we do. And we have a bloated bureaucracy. We're paying salaries that we shouldn't pay. And I think that we should bite the bullet and begin to drastically review salaries. As far as saying, for instance, the legislature, everybody knows, it's common knowledge, it's complained everywhere, that what they're getting, it does not conform with the reality of the Nigerian economy. So we should drastically seize the opportunity of this development to, look at things drastically and begin to effect changes. And for instance, we take the subsidy with pump petroleum. Now, we've said, for instance, we hear that there's going to be a mechanism that will drive the process going forward. But then, is that process being put on ground? Is it going to be implemented beyond this crisis? So I think those are some of the challenges.
All right, very good point you raised there. When we come back from this short break, Dr. Boniface, I'd like us to even explore some of the recommendations of that Rossy report that the president wants us to go back to. Right, welcome back. You're watching the morning show here on Arise. We've been speaking with Dr. Boniface Chizea, a financial analyst, discussing the president's request of the 850 billion naira, which Dr. Chizea said was already part of the 2020 budget. The only difference was that that amount was meant to be sourced from abroad, from external sources. But this time around, it's going to be coming from Nigeria's capital market. Thanks for staying with us, Dr. Boniface Chizea. Now, you did mention the Rossy Report, which to some people, a lot of people have actually praised the president for making that move to call back the Rossy Report and look at some of those recommendations. Let's break it down a little for our viewers. That report recommended that there should be removal of all professional bodies and councils from the national budget. That's one, among so many other recommendations, of course. And the budgetary system should be linked to deliverables and output. Speak to some of these recommendations, including the ones that I just itemized.
Well, I think that, let me first of all say that the president has said that we should look at the Rossy report. I think let's even take it a bit further. I think that, in fact, we need to go back and restructure this economy. We should seize the opportunity. We have a report, 2014 report, which was done. We assembled eminent Nigerians, and they sat over a long period of time. Some monies were expended, and they came up with a report. We need to fundamentally seize this opportunity of this crisis to revisit restructuring of this economy. I think this is very important. It's been going on. I think that we should be able to do that. And if we don't do that, then we are not addressing the right thing. Because if you are talking about collapsing departments and ministries and so on and so forth, and then if you're going to look at the whole structure, then those things, you'll be doing the things out of context. So we have to put the framework in place. And unless we did that, then collapsing ministries and looking at what you just said and so on, for me, it's like putting a new wine into an old wine skin. That's the point to make. And I think we need to do that. We need to look at fundamental issues. Make sure that if we don't do that, we're going around in circles. I will not be able to attain the sort of development you and I will want to see.
What are those fundamental issues then? You just mentioned economic recovery, economic restructuring, which some people have been calling for, that this time actually provides Nigeria the opportunity to respond to that age-old call for restructuring. A lot of people have been asking, what kind of restructuring? Are we talking about political, economic, and what have you? And if we're to zero it down to economic restructuring, what form should it take?
Well, I think that with the facts are there in the public for people to see. It's been advertised. I think that, let's take, for instance, resource allocation. The way it's being done now is not the way it should be done. If you really want to make progress, it's the way it's being done now is inequitable. So we need to go back and look at resource control, look at where resources come from, and then make sure that people who generate resources come back and pay tax to the center. The way it's done now, we are overpowering the center, and we'll continue that way. We will continue to struggle with sharing the cake, and we're not thinking about making this cake larger. I think that for us in this country, if we must progress, then we must begin to empower the component parts of this federation so that each one will be allowed, to grow at its own pace. It is very important. And so we need a loose, union, as it were. And so that the way it is now, let me tell you, what's happening now is that we go on this way, we have contestation, we're talking about where has the person come from, who's going to get what, and so on and so forth, and nobody. And then we have sections of this country that have been spoon-fed. And that is not sustainable going forward. And I think that the challenge of this COVID-19 going forward is that that's not sustainable. And then the monies we're getting today, we're getting money, borrowing money, and so on and so forth, those are just to tidy us over the short term. And so if we begin to address medium term to fairly long term, then we better sit down and take very hard decisions.
I mean, it's hard decisions that need to be made in a very difficult time. It almost seems redundant, Dr. Boniface, but I wonder if you could give us a bit more information on just how bad things are, because before we went under lockdown, I'm sure you're well aware that Nigeria, the Senate itself, had approved $22.7 billion to be released, and yet still here we are again approving another truckload of money. So can we just put this into perspective? Just how bad are things? How bad is the fiscal situation in Nigeria, and how long is it going to take? How much is it going to take for us to get out of it?
Well, I think that the fiscal situation in Nigeria is very bad. Let's call it spade by its name. You have a situation whereby before COVID-19, your debt service to revenue flows was about 60%. And so that means if you really kept fidelity to what you're expected to pay in terms of debt service, then you are spending 60% of your revenue to service debt. Then you have a bloated bureaucracy, and part of it, most of this money, we're going into debt payment. You have a situation whereby your tax to GDP is the lowest probably in the world. And so there are all sorts of structural issues we have on our hands, and we need to address. You have a situation whereby even when we're growing at about 2.2%. That was the latest position, 2.2%, against a population growth rate of about 3%. And that means that definitely you're not having any development within the economy. And so these are challenges I think that we need to face up and address.
Addressing these challenges is exactly what we're trying to figure out on the show this morning. You did talk about the fact that the population is growing faster, way faster than the economy at 3.0% compared to the economy that's growing about 2.5%. And it's even going to be worse because of the COVID situation that we have on our hands. Let's go back to the practical things that we need to do. What are the low-hanging fruits? Just like I said earlier, some analysts have said, can we go back to the 50s when agriculture was the mainstay of the economy? And you've said that this government really, I mean, in all fairness, has done quite a lot in bringing back Nigerian rice, for example. We're all eating Nigerian rice. We're not interested in Chinese or any other rice for that matter. But what are those practical things that we can do? We still export raw materials, export crude oil. Take Germany, for example. Germany gets coffee from Africa, from African countries. All of Africa, including Kenya, and of course a few states in Nigeria, do export coffee, raw coffee. While Germany exports the finished product from coffee and makes multiple times what African countries make from exporting coffee, about $2 billion or so. Germany makes ×3 of that from exporting the finished product. Can we begin to think along those lines?
Yes, I think that's you hit the nail on the head. If you go back, I keep on going back to this issue of the way things have been done, since after some time. It wasn't like that post-independence, and that's why you had groundnut primaries, you had cocoa, you had palm oil, and so on and so forth. Why was that so? Because each section, each region of this, there's no part of this country that doesn't have some form of endowment or the other, and that's a fact. But what's happened is that there was no incentive for them. Everybody concentrated, taking this oil and sharing the money from the oil. That's the issue. So we have to go back. If we don't do something about revenue allocation, revenue sharing, and so on, and then put maybe regional structures in place, and so that if you want to have 100 local governments, you can have it. It becomes your problem. But when you have local governments enshrined and put in the constitution, and you have 774 local governments, and you put in the constitution, and you share monies and resources according to this warped, arrangement, then you have crisis on your hands. And so what is happening is that we keep on, there's this fight, this contestation, and the thing is dwindling. Oil, for instance, now, we're not selling oil, we're not getting money from oil. We are begging people, we're paying double rate on oil. We don't have a storage for oil. And so we're not getting any from oil, and it's not going to get better very soon. I think we better buckle up and know that we're going to be in this situation for a fairly long time. And unless and until we did that, we'll be deceiving ourselves.
I think I heard you say, Dr. Boniface, that you think the government is planning on reworking that. And did you say that you think the government is shifting its dependence away from oil? Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, no. Well, I mean, oil is there, but I think that we should begin to know that oil is going. Even if you take the oil we find, take the oil we have we optimized this? So you have oil, and then you not have refined. You can't refine the oil you produce. And so now people you still go overseas and then import refined products. And then you now come and subsidize the thing. Take diesel. You remove the subsidy from diesel, and people still buy diesel. Remove subsidy from oil, petroleum products. You are not doing that because you've not done that, and then it affects what you've done. It's to subsidize the whole of the West African sub-region. And so this money is being smuggled out because of the arbitrage in price. So people are taking advantage. And so this resource commonwealth is being privatized, and people are putting it into their personal pockets.
Right. I mean, in as much as we can hope that things ease and go back to normal and we move away from this pandemic and the economic ramifications of said pandemic, do you think that if we are going to become what we ideally wished would be, our oil price rebounding and everything going back to normal, do you think that the powers that would be in Nigeria would return back to its heavy dependence on oil? Do you think even in the face of a stronger oil price, the powers that be in Nigeria would be able to say, well, despite this revenue continuing to come in, we are still focusing on diversifying our economy, because we've talked so much about the need to diversify for decades and it just hasn't happened yet. Do you think that once we come out of this pandemic, we will go back to what we've always done, or do you think this will really be a time for change?
Well, I think that we should pray that we don't go back to what it has been. But if you look at the history, you can't take things for granted. You go look at the history and look at what's happened in the past, and look at the fact that even when we put plans in place, we put programs in place, take the economic recovery and growth plan. What's happening to it? So yes, it's a 4-year plan. If you read the documentation, from Central Bank, from International Monetary Fund, it is mentioned there. We should try and implement this thing. So we put these things in place, and we're not implementing them. So those are challenges. So you come, with a record, you come with a history, where even when you say you're going to do things, you don't do them. And at the end of the day, it comes back to the leadership we have, the selection process. So how do we select our leaders? What sort of selection process do we put in place? How do we clean up the selection process? How do we clean up the electoral process? How do we automate the thing and remove as much as possible human intervention? We're making some progress until quite recently, we slided, we went back.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Dr. Boniface Chizea, financial analyst, for joining us this morning.